Welcome to Multiply. It's another beautiful day here. Colin Haddley is Director of Strategy, Insight and Capability across the Middle East, Europe and Africa for Kraft Heinz.
Great to be here. Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah, lovely Edinburgh. 4 seasons in one day. It's bright and sunny now, but a few hours ago it was very rainy. But that's Edinburgh for you.
So Colin, when I started, quite a few years ago now, life seemed to
Even
be...
before me.
Well, marginally. We need
Yeah.
to check that one out, yeah?
Yeah.
But when I started, there seemed to be so much time,
Uh-huh.
yeah? The briefs were beautifully posed over a number of weeks. The execution, the creative development was over a long period of time, and the execution was over a long, and the testing and the research and everything else. It felt much better pace.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, everything is just so fast. No time to think. I've given up commenting on people's creative work because I know that they've probably had 2 hours in which to pull that together and get it online.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, life is much more frenetic now working in this industry from an agent's perspective. So what about your feelings, yeah? From those early days, cutting around Burton-upon-Trent, to those frenetic days within Kraft Heinz. How's the industry changed in your mind?
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of complexity that's come. So you've got fragmentation of customers, you've got fragmentation of media channels, fragmentation of agencies. Used to be much more, holistic agencies. Things have definitely got quicker, faster pace, and consumers are much more part of the conversation now. So before it was much more of a broadcast of your brand, and now it's more of a conversation, and people really rate each other's opinions as much as the brand, and so you need to have a different conversation with the consumer. It's much more interactive than it used to be.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that are better, a lot of better things. I think the richness of data is amazing. I think we connect through research in more imaginative ways than we used to. We have a richness of data, but we also have more distractions because of that data. And so I suppose the bit for me in looking at a lot of marketeers, and I've seen many generations of marketeers kind of growing up, how do you balance the need to dive into that data, make sure you're on time and agile and really reduce the budgets, whilst at the same time having really clear focus about what's right for your business? And I think if we can balance that a little bit better, we can get much better results, in terms of marketing executions. And
do you think that when you started, there was more of a focus on immediacy of results? Is it the same playing field, do you think, now?
I don't know. There's a huge amount about the long and the short of it. The Lesbianet and Peter Field and the Byron Sharps and all these things. Fundamentally, consumer behaviour has not significantly changed in terms of their desires and needs and wants, and therefore you need to build brands long term. Heinz has been around for 150 years. But brands take time to build memory structures and those things. But also there's a need to deliver results quickly, and that's a capitalist world that we live in. So the constant challenge, I think it's always been the same. It's always been, I want to build my brand, and there's a legacy for it, but I have to deliver results now. I think the road through that is if you're really clear about the role of your brand, you can do both. You can balance both, and it's about spending the right amount on the right things, doing really crafted campaigns, but also reacting in terms of that day-to-day sales. And that is possible. It's just, I think there's more distractions, particularly in the shorter term stuff with the rise of digital. There's a few more channels and touch points to consider. So it's more complicated, but short and long term has always been there.
And what about the idea of transparency? So nowadays, digital means and data have allowed us to dive deep over the wall of client businesses and deep into that brand. Not only the brand, the ingredients, the investors, the whole works, their ambitions, their values. And as consumers, we can understand, we can taste the brand out with the actual physical product.
Yep.
So how's that manifesting itself on brand
Yeah,
side?
I think that's good actually. I think that's helped because we need more content. It means that marketeers dig deeper into the story around their brands. And there's a lot of richness in brands that have been crafted over years. Huge amounts of richness and stories, Heinz, how he invented Heinz 57 and H.J. Heinz did that, and all these stories that we need to help us tell the story in different ways. And so I think we're much more rigorous about that storytelling and all the content that we need to build. Yeah. That's certainly improved, I think.
Yeah, and honesty and an ability to accept flaws.
I think you need to be consistent in your communication, and therefore you need a truth behind the brand. And if you know what that is, that will be a guiding principle for you. I think the other side of it is just one caution though, is how you use KPIs or data, because it depends what you measure. Are you measuring impressions? Are you measuring mentions? Are you measuring click-throughs? It can be a little bit self-serving to have big numbers on all these metrics. What are the things that are really shifting the perception of your brand? What are the behaviors that consumers really are shifting towards? So you need to get behind those numbers a bit and not just take them at face value.
Yeah. And how are you, traditionally, in those early days back in maybe the Kimberly-Clark days or certainly the Bass Brewers days as well, there was a complete refocus then in terms of weight of marketing spend towards one type of medium to the current days of media selection. How's that been influenced in your mind? Who's calling the shots in that world?
I think the big difference now is you have the bit I really like is the idea of data-driven marketing. So even if you're buying mainstream TV, there's lots of choices you can make. What time of day, who's the audience, how much waste are you accepting? And if you're driving penetration, maybe you can accept quite a broad audience. How do you use video on demand to extend your reach? So there's more data to enable you to be more precise, but I still believe in mainstream media to drive recency and reach. You've got to keep doing that.
And what about that? How's that manifested in some recent pieces of work that you've been involved with that you think actually, we're starting to nail this?
Yeah, I think there's I think the whole marketing mix around Heinz this year, the 150th year has been really impressive in the fact it has some core mainstream media, which is about clean plates, which is it's a really interesting message, but it's linked to the brand. Yeah. It celebrates the broader breadth of products, but then we also layer on top that topicality and things like Ed Sheeran on top, the caviar that we did, which is an act not ad, creating a texture around that mainstream media and involving consumers in different ways, I think is a great example of the blend you can have in today's modern media.
And what about the sort of idea that, particularly with the Ed Sheeran thing, is that it's almost like your media, your marketing, your agencies, your team have to be constantly on in order to manifest that relationship with consumers. Yep. And that's a completely different way of working than maybe a few years ago.
And one of the things we're doing increasingly on that is go back to that brand truth thing. If you know what your key message is and you express that simply, you can brief your agencies on that key message, and they can be looking proactively for ideas. So you don't have to go through a whole briefing cycle for every piece of work. Yeah. We're getting some really good strategic relationships with our agencies that allow us then, or them, to be much more proactive in coming with ideas.
Right, yeah. And so some of the relationships at Kraft Heinz, for example, have been there over a number of years.
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about agency infrastructure, because I'm often asked about, what's changing. The industry is definitely changing. And I think the infrastructure you build is super important. So let's think about our infrastructure. We have a very important global brand that needs to be marketed across all of EMEA. And for that, we have a strategic relationship the last 5 years or so with BBH. And that represents Heinz in all its forms across our zone. That's really important. And actually, that's gone to global work as well. So that's one level. But then we have local brands. We have some fantastic brands like Orlando in Spain, Plasmon in Italy. These are brands that have local food cultures, and we're very happy to use local creative agencies because they know the cultures. Yeah. So we use Lola, for example, in Spain for Orlando Frito, for example. But at the same time, we need to build efficiency because we want our non-working dollars to be as low as possible. So we actually have, again, a 4 or 5 year relationship now with Hogarth, who does all of our agency, all of our production, all of our primary production. That gives us scale, mega shoots, economies, but we still had that strategic relationship. So the creatives from the agencies always attend the shoots. So there's always a creative all the way through, but we get real efficiencies. We also have big agencies that like BBH, we also have small agencies. We have Wonderland in PR is a very small agency. Obviously, we've worked with you guys for a long time. So it's all about choosing the right skills against the right jobs.
Yeah.
But what's really important is the people in those agencies.
And then as going back to your early scientific days, as marketing has become even more scientific and forensic, then presumably the range of agencies that you have at your disposal is ever more complex.
Yep.
It's almost a complicated thing to manage, having all of those different skills that that are available to you. How do you cope with that?
Yeah, we do allow for some experimentation. So, you want to have some consistency. So we tend to, for example, our concept testing has been pretty consistent, so we can benchmark. Our brand tracking's been quite consistent the last few years. But then we'll experiment. We may use an agency like Been There, Done That, which is about crowdsourcing creative. We may use a spike of that and see how that works. We may use Zappy for some projects, or smaller companies. And mix things up. We're doing some social listening now. Yeah. So I think there's keep a core, because you have to keep a benchmark and make sure you know what's happening on a longer term scale. But do some experiments and find out what suits your
and
mix.
what's fresh and what's interesting and who's bringing something new rather than just.
It is exciting, because I think now, because technology's moved on, people can generate real specialist skills with relatively small agencies, and we can back those in different ways. So good times.
Brilliant. And opportunities always for lots of other agencies and people with new ambitions.
Yeah.
Which is great. So if I was to look back at my career, I think that the innovation part of it is the most exciting. Yeah, it's quite easy to get caught on the treadmill of normality and the treadmill of the yearly cycle of delivering marketing campaigns. Innovation brings something fresh all the time, and it might be good, it might be bad, it might be a success, it might be an absolute failure. But I think over the years, the projects I've worked in, the things that have really sparked my imagination. Kraft Heinz, enormous organization, must be absolutely bursting with innovation. So it'd be really good actually to get your perspective on how that feeds the machine of Kraft Heinz, how you get inspired to look into new areas, and what's been capturing your imagination over the last couple of years.
Yeah, a lot of work on innovation. One thing is to make sure we have the right ingredients around process. One great value at Kraft Heinz is ownership and autonomy. And it means that people really can drive projects. On top of that, we layer a nice little bit of governance, which makes sure that we can drive projects through. And we have some fantastic categories and brands to inspire us. And we obviously want to go for fewer, bigger opportunities and scale them. And I think Seriously Good Mayo is a great example. All the work we've done on 50% less salt and sugar, really good work streams. But I've got, and we sort of share this, I think, a bit, which is I've got a view that's great, but I really want more people having more ideas more of the time. And that's quite hard to do because there are barriers to that. So it's quite hard to organise an innovation workshop, and it becomes kind of like a special event. And therefore what you're doing is you're spending lots of time on analysis, and you're not spending enough time, I don't think, in solving. And those things will be iterative, and they'll feed into those fewer, bigger projects. So the stuff that we're doing now at the moment on Ideas Factory, I think is really interesting. Where what we're doing is building an online platform so people can plan workshops super easy, really quickly. And I'm doing my first workshop with Ideas Factory on Tuesday, so really brilliant. Excited about that. But what it does is it takes the pain out of doing it, because it gives you the stim that you need, and we curate that stim so it's suitable for the right categories. It gives you the structure and the exercises. And it gives you the personas, it gives you the confidence to have a go. So my vision for that is that all marketeers can just turn on ideation sessions, maybe 1 hour, 2 hours, much more often, to rebalance this analysis versus creativity. And I'm hoping that will then flow naturally into our innovation process. So what I'm saying is we're really good and we're doing a really good job, but who knows, if we can turn on a bigger community, what else could we achieve?
The idea of creativity being essentially electrified would throw a lot of people into meltdown, particularly those from a creative background that say that creativity is a kind of natural born talent, a dark art of those blessed with those abilities to think differently. So how do you feel about, developing something that is essentially a digital tool.
I think the point about creativity is the more people you have, because if creativity is about blending conventions, the more perspectives you can put into that, the more diverse the team, the better ideas you're going to get. So in those sessions, we often invite, we'll have marketing, R&D, possibly sales, some of our agencies. So I'm not trying to exclude anybody. All I'm saying is by democratizing it, broadening it out, we get more seeds to go into that formal process.
And the digital platform provides the medium in which to bring all of those perspectives together.
Yeah, it's an enabler. Because I mean, if you don't have that sort of thing, you say to a brand manager, can you organise a creative session? You see the fear in their eyes. How do I even start to build the stimulus for that? Because if you have good stimulus, you can have a much better creative session. Anything we can do to help.
I think that's the most important thing, is that there is process and protocols and approaches, but ultimately we get inspired by stimulus. So at the crux of anything, there has to be a rich stimulus springboard in which to activate it. Perfect. It's been a real pleasure meeting you, Colin, here in our gymnasium, and stretching your mind, stretching mine as well. And we hope that people have enjoyed what we've had to say. And thanks for all your insight. Thanks for all the gems that you've blessed us today. And good luck in the future.